Have you ever wondered what the longest moment of your life was? It probably wasn't your first kiss, or your wedding day, or even the day you were born. It may have been 4 completely forgotten hours. Every year, more than 300 million people willingly allow someone to erase their consciousness. They sign a form, lie down on an operating table, breathe through a mask, or feel a medication enter their bloodstream, and then they simply disappear. Not physically. Your heart keeps beating. Your lungs are supported. Your brain is still alive. But the person experiencing all of it suddenly isn't there anymore. A few hours later, a voice gently calls your name. You open your eyes. The surgery is over. Time appears to have skipped forward without asking your permission. There was no darkness, no dreaming, no sensation of waiting. From your perspective, the last thing you remember happened only an instant ago. So, where were you? It sounds like a philosophical question, but neuroscientists have been trying to answer it for decades. And the deeper they look inside the brain, the stranger the mystery becomes. Because despite how routine anesthesia has become, modern medicine still can't fully explain why consciousness disappears so completely. Most people imagine anesthesia as a simple switch. You're awake, someone flips it off. Then later, they flip it back on. Here's the first clue. Almost everyone, including many patients about to have surgery, believes anesthesia is simply a very deep form of sleep. It isn't. That may sound surprising because anesthesiologists often say, "We're going to put you to sleep." It's reassuring. It sounds familiar. But biologically, those two states are remarkably different. When you fall asleep naturally, your brain never really shuts down. Throughout the night, it cycles through an intricate pattern of stages: light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep. Electrical activity rises and falls in repeating rhythms. Memories are reorganized. Emotions are processed. Dreams appear and disappear. Even while you're deeply asleep, your brain continues responding to sounds, touch, and changes in your environment. A loud noise can wake you. Your name spoken softly might pull you toward consciousness without you ever realizing why. Sleep is an active process. General anesthesia looks nothing like that. Instead of cycling through different stages, brain activity becomes profoundly altered. The familiar rhythms of natural sleep disappear and are replaced by patterns that neuroscientists almost never observe under normal conditions. Rather than drifting between different states, the brain settles into a highly controlled condition created entirely by chemistry. Researchers describe it as an entirely different biological state. So, if you aren't sleeping, what exactly is happening inside your head? For years, scientists assumed anesthetic drugs simply switched off the brain. It seemed logical. Less consciousness must mean less brain activity. But when researchers began studying patients with increasingly sophisticated EEG recordings, they found something completely unexpected. Many regions remained electrically active throughout anesthesia. Individual groups of neurons continued firing. Some areas were almost as busy as they were during wakefulness. If parts of your brain are still working, why aren't you? The answer has everything to do with communication. Your brain isn't one giant computer performing a single calculation. It's closer to a vast civilization made up of billions of specialized cells spread across dozens of interconnected regions. Vision is processed in one network, sound in another. Memory relies on structures buried deep within the brain. Decision-making happens largely in the frontal cortex. Your sense of your own body depends on still another system. None of these regions creates consciousness by itself. Every thought you have, every memory you recall, and every sensation you experience exists because millions of separate brain networks are talking to one another at extraordinary speed. Researchers call this functional connectivity. Under general anesthesia, that conversation begins to fall apart. Instead of one unified network sharing information across the brain, communication fragments. Messages that normally travel effortlessly between distant regions suddenly slow down or never arrive at all. Some neuroscientists believe this may explain one of the greatest mysteries of consciousness itself. Perhaps consciousness only exists when all of those parts work together. And if that's true, general anesthesia may not actually switch your brain off at all. It may simply stop your brain from becoming you. But If your brain is still alive and many of its individual parts are still active, that leads to an even more unsettling question. Could part of your mind still be there without you ever knowing it? Because although general anesthesia is remarkably safe, there is one phenomenon that reminds us we still don't understand consciousness as well as we'd like to believe. It's called anesthesia awareness. Fortunately, it's extremely rare. Estimates suggest it occurs in roughly 1 or 2 out of every 1,000 general anesthetics. But considering how many millions of operations take place every year, that still means thousands of people experience something medicine works incredibly hard to prevent. Most never feel pain. Some remember only distant voices, the metallic sound of surgical instruments. But in the most severe cases, patients later described something almost impossible to imagine. They became aware without being able to move. They tried to open their eyes. Nothing happened. They tried to speak. Nothing happened. Their body remained completely still while their mind briefly resurfaced. But they also revealed something extraordinary about the brain. Consciousness, movement, pain, and memory are not controlled by a single switch. They're separate systems. In reality, anesthesia is more like conducting an orchestra. One medication suppresses consciousness, another blocks pain, another relaxes muscles or produces complete paralysis so surgeons can work safely and precisely. Each drug targets a different biological process, and that means one system can occasionally recover before another. It completely changed how anesthesiologists think about the unconscious brain, because losing consciousness and losing the ability to move are not the same biological event. They're simply designed to happen together. But if consciousness can briefly return, why do so few patients remember it afterward? Many of anesthetic drugs don't simply interrupt awareness. They interfere with the brain's ability to create memories in the first place. Deep within your temporal lobe sits a structure called the hippocampus, one of the most important regions for turning experiences into lasting memories. Throughout your normal day, it continuously records the events that later become your personal history. The conversation you had this morning, the face you passed in the street. Without the hippocampus doing its job, those experiences simply dissolve before they ever become part of your life story. Many anesthetic drugs deliberately interrupt that process. Even if fragments of perception briefly occur, they often never become permanent memories. Your brain doesn't simply forget them later, it may never save them at all. That raises an unsettling possibility. Perhaps consciousness is more fragile than we think, not because experience disappears, but because experience without memory becomes almost impossible to prove ever existed. And that's where another mystery quietly appears. Think back to the last time you had a dreamless night's sleep. You probably don't remember anything that happened during those hours. You sense that several hours were gone. General anesthesia is completely different. Patients don't describe it as sleeping deeply. From their perspective, time simply doesn't exist. A 30-minute operation, even an 8-hour procedure, inside your own experience, they're virtually identical. It's as if one moment of your life has been cut cleanly out of existence and the remaining 2 moments stitched perfectly together. Neuroscientists believe this happens because your sense of time isn't generated by clocks. Your brain builds the feeling of time by constantly linking one moment to the next, creating an unbroken chain of perception and memory. Interrupt that chain completely and time itself disappears, because the brain stopped constructing the experience of moving through it, which leads to a fascinating realization. Maybe time isn't something you experience. Maybe it's something your brain continuously creates. And if a simple combination of molecules can erase hours so completely that they never seem to have existed, there's one question that becomes impossible to ignore. If anesthesia doesn't simply silence consciousness, what happens when a drug changes consciousness instead of turning it off altogether? One anesthetic, however, refuses to follow the usual rules. Its name is ketamine. Unlike most anesthetic drugs, ketamine doesn't simply suppress brain activity. Instead of producing a clean shutdown, ketamine creates something neurologists call a dissociative state. And what patients describe afterward is remarkably different. Some describe an overwhelming sense of detachment, as though their thoughts still existed but no longer belonged to the body lying beneath them. Some experience vivid landscapes, impossible geometries, or encounters that feel more real than ordinary dreams. For years, these reports were dismissed as little more than hallucinations. Then researchers noticed something unexpected. Many descriptions sounded strangely familiar, not because they matched ordinary dreams, but because they resembled another phenomenon that has puzzled scientists for decades: near-death experiences. The feeling of leaving the body, the disappearance of pain, the strange distortion of time, the overwhelming sense that reality itself has changed. No, this doesn't mean near-death experiences and ketamine are the same thing. But both appear to involve a brain whose normal communication networks have become profoundly disrupted. Instead of constructing the stable reality you experience every day, the brain begins assembling a very different one. And that's an important reminder. Your conscious experience isn't a direct recording of the outside world. It's a model. Every second, your brain filters billions of signals, compares them with memories, and assembles what feels like a seamless reality. The world you experience is not reality itself. It's your brain's best reconstruction of it. General anesthesia interrupts that reconstruction almost completely. Ketamine changes the blueprint. Two different roads leading to two completely different experiences of consciousness. Which brings us to something every patient eventually experiences: waking up. Most people imagine waking from anesthesia as the reverse of falling asleep. It isn't. Your brain doesn't suddenly switch back on. It rebuilds its functional networks. Researchers using advanced brain imaging have found that different neural networks recover at different speeds. Basic reflexes often return first. Then movement. Language follows. Attention slowly improves. But the last systems to fully recover are often the ones that make you feel unmistakably like yourself. Your brain appears to recover in much the same way. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Age makes this process even more interesting. Older brains often need longer to restore these complex communication networks. That's one reason some patients experience temporary confusion or reduced mental clarity for days after surgery. Researchers believe it's because reconnecting billions of conversations takes longer than disconnecting them. Which brings us back to the question we started with. Where were you? Modern neuroscience gives a surprisingly honest answer. We don't know. Medicine understands anesthesia remarkably well. We know which receptors many drugs bind to, how to monitor brain activity, and how to keep millions of patients safe every year. What we still don't fully understand is consciousness itself. And that's the real mystery. General anesthesia works every single day because scientists discovered how to interrupt conscious experience long before they discovered what consciousness actually is. Perhaps it's an event. Something that exists only while billions of neurons exchange information in exactly the right way. And maybe that's why anesthesia feels so different from sleep. When you sleep, the story keeps unfolding. When you're under general anesthesia, the story stops being written. The next time someone asks you to count backward from 10, you probably won't remember reaching 7, or even 5, because from your perspective, those missing hours will never have existed at all. Not because time disappeared, not because your brain died, but because, for a little while, there was no one there to experience it. And if your entire sense of reality depends on a brain continuously assembling the person you call you, maybe the strangest question was never where consciousness goes under anesthesia. Maybe it's this: how many times has your brain quietly rebuilt the person reading these words without you ever noticing?